Hello and welcome to Conscious Living. My name is Marc Caron, and we air every Wednesday here in Vancouver on 100.5 FM CFRO in Vancouver. And today, it's that time of year where we get geared up for our big event, the Spirit Plant Medicine Conference. And a lot of our work right now is, really sharing information on the powerful use of entheogenic and natural-based plant medicine. And today I'm really excited for our guest. We have with us today Avi Esther, and we're going to be talking about the magical and iconic Amanita Muscaria, that little red and white mushroom that you'll probably see in the Lower Mainland growing around, and that's you see in folklore and things all over the world. There's a really rich history, and it's also a very powerful medicine that sometimes I feel we don't talk enough about in the spirit plant medicine world. So Avi Esther is joining us today, and she's a trained and very experienced trauma-informed transformational guide. She's studied medicinal herbs and mushrooms intently since 2018 and facilitates Amanita Muscaria and symbiotic herbal and mycelial friends microdose coaching and larger dose journey ceremonies. She's studied medicinal herbs and mushrooms, and we're really excited to bring her on the program today because her ethics and integrity are a foundational pillar of her work. And just in the short time that I've had to chat with her already as we got ready for our program today, I'm really looking forward to this program because she's got a beautiful light and a wealth of information. Welcome to the program, Avi.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me here today. I'm really excited about this conversation.
Well, that's fantastic, as am I, because, as we kind of talked in the preliminary, while we were getting ready, just some of the misconceptions of Amanita and maybe things that people don't know in terms of how to use it. But before we start diving in, maybe you can share with us a little bit of your history, your story, how you got into working with this mushroom specifically, and the work that you do. That's kind of led us to be here today.
Okay, I'll see if I can summarize succinctly. um, I think it's fair to say that I've been on a healing journey for a really, really long time. And when it became more of a conscious, like I need to understand myself journey, it started actually with ancestral healing. And I name that because what I found with Amanita muscaria is that it's deeply connected to every ancestral root in the Northern Hemisphere. So if your ancestry is from the Northern Hemisphere, this mushroom connects into it somehow. And that's proved out through folklore and mythologies and the iconography that we can see throughout literally the Northern Hemisphere and actually beyond. So my sort of work within ancestral healing led me down paths of going into understanding childbirth, because when I gave birth to my children, they were ecstatic and orgasmic, cosmic, psychedelic experiences, and nobody else I knew at the time had that. And so I needed to know what happened to me and how I could teach it to other women, because I mean, that's really the way we should give birth. Like, pain and death, or like orgasmic psychedelia. I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer, I think. And so, right? And so like I know those don't necessarily sound like they're connected, but I promise that they truly, truly are. And so my path kind of, as all of our life paths do, swerved and wound around and circled back. And herbs, starting with homeopathy and flower essences, were always a part of this journey to help regulation in these different modalities that I trained in. And then in 2017, I got a knock on the door, and it was my neighbor. And she was like, "Hey, we want to do a full moon psilocybin ceremony. Will you facilitate it?" And I kind of asked some questions because I'd never been asked to facilitate psychedelics before. And over the course of that conversation, I realized that facilitating psychedelics and facilitating deep transformational, ancestral, or birth preparation or sexual healing work was pretty much the same thing. And so I said yes. And then a year let me think, a year and 6 months later, I was meditating under a yew tree, and the yew tree told me to find my mushroom teacher. Um, and I thought that was a kind of strange thing to hear. And I kind of went, all right. And then I went to pick up my kids and I heard my name. I thought it was another parent. And I turned around and there was no person there, but this big, bright red Amanita Muscaria. And I looked at it and I went, what? No, that mushroom's poisonous. But like, I audibly heard it. I could feel it in my whole body, the yes. And then I had to go get my kids. So I went and I got them and I sort of left it. And 2 days later, we were walking on an Iron Age hill fort that has this wonderful mythology of a dragon. And actually, I learned later that it was the nest of the dragon where the trees that told me to find my mushroom teacher used to be 500 years ago, or so the local legends say. So we were walking on this hill fort, and my son ran ahead, and suddenly he stops and starts like doing all these janky movements. And my daughter and I were like, what is he doing? And we looked over and we see that he and a deer are like transfixed with each other. And they're like, my son's doing this one thing, and then the deer does the same thing, and they're mirroring and adding to, mirroring and adding to in this dance that went on so long that my daughter and I had to squat down because our legs were getting tired of standing there. And then at some point, the deer lent its head down, and because we were on a hill fort, we couldn't see what the deer was doing. So we stood up and we looked down the hill, and there were 17 big, bright fruiting Amanita Muscaria. And my daughter and I went, whoa. And it sort of knocked my son out of his trance, and he leaned forward and he went, whoa. Because of course I told my kids about it, obviously. And then the deer kind of like went, what? And then another deer came up, and that deer was like, what are you doing? And the other deer that was in the dance with my son was like, I don't know. So they kind of like skipped off. Not like normal deer running away. It was far jankier than that, like with weird little jumps and like janky skips. And off they went, and my kids and I went and we picked 7 like big Amanita Muscaria. And that was the beginning of my work with them. And that was at, a time when there wasn't an abundance of information. My dear friend Kevin Feeney had not published his wonderful book. There was no, access to easy information. So I sort of used a bit of common sense, working with herbs and having foraged other mushrooms, to dry them while I figure out what they're going to teach me and how to work with them. And so it became a process of kind of digging through weird old blogs, like blogs that were definitely written in HTML in the early noughties, and like, or maybe before then, and like having to like translate from Russian and like translate from this, and like digging through Arrowhead and just anything, going to the library. Like I really like I went on like a sort of 4-month deep dive in researching, and about 6 to 8 weeks in, I decided that the best way to keep them would be to make a tincture. And so I did prepare the tincture while I continued to research to understand dosing and all of these things. And then it literally has just become this beautiful teaching relationship where every year they work with me and they unfold a new layer of how they work within the body. I get to meet this incredible sort of underground niche, weird little taboo sector of other people and professionals and witches and wizards who live in random woodlands across Europe and America, who are working with Amanita Muscaria. And we get to learn more and more and more about not just the sort of initial uses medicinally, but as we go deeper, how it heals literally every layer of the human being. It works in ectomycorrhizal relationship, both in the forest and within our bodies. And its whole kind of cheeky fairy-like relationship with us all is actually about being in mutual relationship with, which means if you piss them off, they will give you a smack. And if you piss them off too much in equal proportion, then they'll give you a really hard smack. And in some cases, that has been, that does look like death. It's not in a lot of cases, it's very rare, but it can happen. But you have to remember that the psychology, if we can call it that, of an ancient primordial mushroom is going to be different from what we think. So the morality, the respect, those things are going to be more animistic in their foundations than our sort of normative ideas of what ethics or morality is. So I think that was a good synopsis of how it started and where we got to.
Wow. I love your story, and it brings up so many things to unpack. And I remember one of our speakers at our conference last year, she had this one great line. Her name was Susan Leopold. And she said, if the plants are talking to you and you can hear them, you better listen. And, in the work that we do, it's one thing, the plant medicines, but then I started meeting, tree whisperers, people who talk to the trees. And then to hear your story and to see all of that connection. And, you're such a great example in your story of how the plants were talking to you, you were hearing them and you listened. And just the cute story with your kids and the deer is just a beautiful, I think, reminder and example of, how to follow the path when nature's calling, like those coincidences that come up that when somebody says, you got to talk to this person, and you hear that 3 times in the same, couple of hours, or, these coincidences have a reason if we are aware enough to kind of understand and pick up on it versus just thinking maybe we're going crazy or a voice in our head. And the other thing that I found interesting in your story was the relationship of the deer to your son to the mushroom, because there is, from what I know of Amanita, there's in the ancient or the folklore of history, the deer is an active part in how kind of people discovered the power of these mushrooms. So maybe you can talk on that a little bit, because that's something to do with what's all about.
Okay, first of all, break down that there's a few different species that we're talking about. So you have different kinds of deer, and like in my forest here in the UK, there's 4 different types of deer. But the deer that mainly people are talking about when they're talking about Amanita muscaria is reindeer. Now, reindeer are a different breed of deer. They're actually more similar to like caribou than they are the sort of common deer that we find. And the main thing about that is that it's the females who keep their antlers. So, for example, like Santa Claus with his reindeer, none of them are dudes if they have antlers. They're all female. So that's the one thing I kind of feel the need to say. So the peoples of Siberia and the sort of northern Indo-European, I'm picturing it in my mind and drawing it with my hand. I don't know, just to like bring it out here right now that it's currently either being rained on or covered in the northern lights because we have a lot of incredible solar activity at the moment. So all of those people used Amanita muscaria, and before the time of agriculture, they were nomadic peoples. So they would follow their herds. Actually, this goes all the way into the steppes region, beyond just the reindeer tribes, into the horse tribes. And so you have sort of 3 different main Indo-European animal tribes, and all of them connect to Amanita muscaria. So you've got the reindeer tribes. Again, the reindeer are slightly different from the common deer. You've got the horse peoples of the flatlands of the steppes, and then you've got the bear people. And even the bear people have very incredible mythologies and stories that connect the bear and the mother bear to Amanita muscaria, because actually bears really like that mushroom. If you give it a Google, you'll find really funny videos. And so all three of these nomadic people tribes, back before the time of agriculture, worked with Amanita muscaria. And they're with the shepherds, not so much within the tribes, because at this point we've now found a lot of these recipes where they were drying and decarboxylating, and actually like it wasn't like just drinking the shaman's urine all the time. But you can imagine if you're a herder and your responsibility is to like watch the deers so they don't wander off, or to let everybody know that the deer are moving on, and it's cold and it's endlessly dark. And sometimes when you eat the dried mushroom in larger doses, it can make you feel sick before the nice part comes. Then actually catching the urine will decarboxylate it in a way that maybe it's not going to taste the nicest, but it'll be easier on your system. You have a nice sort of quickly tingly warm effect. But it wouldn't be very good if what you need it for is that get up and go. Because the two main alkaloids in Amanita muscaria, the ibotenic acid, which the majority of the people are like, oh, it's the big bad one. Watch out for the ibotenic acid. Actually, it gives you bursts of energy. It like fortifies your body and makes you feel like you're 5 times stronger. Like, oh my gosh, like you have to walk a lot. You can't like have a dose of Amanita muscaria that's not really decarboxylated and then like sit there. It's like hell. Oh my God, I hate doing that. Like you have to walk. And it's incredible because when you walk with the ibotenic acid in your system, I mean, your feet just know where you are. Your feet are one with the land, with the rhizome of the forest. And that's the best way that I can describe this feeling. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me that that would be the predominant way. The urine, excuse me, the urine drinking would be the predominant method of consumption. And actually, if you look at the Koryak people of Siberia, they literally they harvest, they dry, like they put these trays over their fires in their funny little huts. I shouldn't call them funny, that's very judgmental. Anyway, in their huts, and they dry them out sort of over a day or two, slowly over the fire. And then they just nibble them throughout the day, because in that environment, if you don't go and get your firewood, you die. If you don't go and get your water, you die. Like you have to do the work, and it's like physically intensive with long miles that you have to walk. But I mean, I'll tell you for nothing, nibbling Amanita muscaria in the doses that they do every day and having those ibotenic acid kicks and then like walking 20 miles, actually, that sounds like a lot of fun, because the Amanita helps your temperature to rise so you feel warmer. In like sub-zero temperatures, that's a grace. And it, gives you strength. So something that would normally be heavy feels less heavy. And then when you're done with your day, it helps you sleep deeply, because our bodies, and this feeds back into the whole urine thing, our bodies decarboxylate the ibotenic acid into mucimol or muscimol, depending on how you like to say it, because we are divided on how we like to say it. We we in the Amanita muscaria world. So muscimol is the alkaloid within the mushroom that gives you that nice glutamate hum, that gives you that sort of nice sleepy, ready for bed feeling. So if it's that you need help sleeping, what you want is you want more muscimol in whatever you're taking than ibotenic acid. But if what you want is to be like, right, I'm ready for my day, I don't need coffee, although I do like a coffee, I don't need it. And then you have the sort of less decarboxylated mushroom that can be fresh in the right dose, or gently dried, either made into a tea or just nibbled on. My My favorite way to meet this mushroom, I call the way of the nibble. But to be fair, unless it will definitely kill you, I actually promote the way of the nibble as the way that we intimately connect with all of the natural world. So obviously, if it will kill you, don't put it in your mouth. When I say kill you, I mean like one bite, like a death cap or a destroying angel, don't put it in your mouth. Leave it alone. Yeah. But if it's not that sort of intense of like it's going to shut down your liver and destroy you, then actually just having a little nibble or just putting it to your mouth is a very natural and intimate way that we get to connect our biome, our blood through our mucosal lining to the Earth's biome that we live upon and connects I mean, I know we don't have a rhizome, but if people were trees, we would. So our rhizome to the rhizome of the forests and the nature that we live in. So I think that was a good synopsis of mixing folklore with science.
Yeah, it certainly got me thinking, and um, it's just a side thought. It's like, where would they have ever come up with, drinking urine, and why they would have thought that? But unless you have an answer for that, it's just one of those things that make you go,
Well, there is with
right?
the body decarboxylates the ibotenic acid into muscimol, and so when you urine, actually, when you urinate, there will be the active alkaloid muscimol in the urine, so you can actually catch your urine and re-drink it. I mean, if you
Well,
want.
they do that in Vedic practices, right? In Ayurveda and
I
things.
know.
I've heard of these things, and yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like, and if you look back at at these times back in those days, just the thought of them, how they knew that and knew to do that, or how they discovered that. So I love your nibble idea. That's kind of the way I've been rolling for the past while now, and in all things that I do is the microdose is becoming so popular.
Mm.
Now, what would you say to people? Because locally here in the Vancouver and Lower Mainland area, you can walk around and see Amanita can be quite prolific in certain areas. And for people maybe watching this and getting interested and curious, what would you suggest for them or recommend? Because of course, we always talk dose low and slow, have a sitter. There's a number of different things because of course we advocate, safe use, conscious activity, don't do anything, foolish. And this is something that you hear so many stories about psilocybin and, the bad trips where people buy a bag and then they eat a bag because they have no idea. What do what do you recommend for people when they discover this, if they're new to it? How should we approach the mushroom specifically with the respect and the reverence? And how would we then, what could we be using it for in today's world?
Great questions. Okay, so first, I want to share the sort of spectrum of people who come to me and ask me these kind of similar questions. And the spectrum is people who are hyper afraid, like are even afraid to take a tincture that's fully decarboxylated, all the way to people who are like, oh, I want to like go do like a huge trip and just not even understanding that there's a big difference between psilocybin and Amanita muscaria, and that they really don't want to just jump in on a really big trip because that's not going to be very nice. I mean, it could be Amanita muscaria will do whatever Amanita muscaria wants to do ultimately, but most of the time they have quite horrific experiences, and like I said, some result in hospitalizations, coma, and death. Um, Rarely, but sometimes.
And I
So
think I just want to interrupt 1 second. And I think that's really a super important message to drive home. And not just with Amanita, but with all medicines. It's so important. That's why we don't call them drugs or anything like that. We're talking about these things, from a place of respect, reverence, safety. And I
Yes.
just wanted to really drive that home because this is what people need to know, and why, people, when we got on before, both Michael and I expressed our experiences of just kind of being a little afraid.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you're bringing this up. And then how do we negate that?
So what I recommend for people who really do have that kind of fear or a lot of trepidation, and they're curious about microdosing. And I think the my favorite word so far is curious. If you can replace longing and desire and needing with curiosity, you can replace fear with curiosity, then you'll find a pathway of action that becomes quite intuitive and natural to you. It'll feel like, oh yeah, I kind of already knew this. Oh yeah. So if you're wandering around your woodland or neighborhood and you come across one of these beautiful friends, you see the top is beautiful in red with the white spots, and you've got this little veil. This one's dried, but usually it's like this beautiful skirt that has these little same warts that are on the top around the little skirt, and then you've got your stamen, and then you've got your vulva. And I don't keep the volas. I have a jar full, but we're not going to get into that. So actually, what I recommend is that you pick it and you dry it and you hang out with it in the same way that we talked about listening to the trees, or you know being able to find that relationship of listening with your natural world around you. So it's like, okay, if you just pick it and leave it, it's going to turn to mush, most likely. 9 times out of 10, it's just going to turn to mush. I can show you, I've got a basket of mush because somebody foraged for me and half of it turned to mush. It's not nice. I took it, it's by the back door. So, and so you want to dry them. How can you dry them? Dry them in a dehydrator or pop them in the oven at the lowest temperature with the door open. Yeah. So I dry them here between 50 and 70 degrees Celsius. 70 is quite high. But if you, again, want that decarboxylation of the ibotenic acid into muscimol, then that's what you want. Either way, before you even take the nibble, just dry it and hang out with it. If you have an altar, put it on your altar. If you meditate, meditate with it. But my favorite is to put it on your bedside and just sort of talk to it. I promise they listen. They listen to all of the verbal and the nonverbal that you're saying. Probably better than you even listen to yourself, if I'm honest. And have them as a dream ally, because they'll appear, they'll talk to you. They show up in people's dreams and they go, "You need to work with me." And then I get these random calls going, "Okay, so Amanita's been appearing in my dreams, and I felt I needed to reach out because I don't know what to do." And so that first step before you even take the nibble or you choose to consume, especially if you have any fear, is just hang out with them. Tell them your fears. Dream with them. See what happens in the dreams. What are they showing you? What are they revealing with you? Not to you, with you. And then you'll get to a point, because so far every single person has. And I mean, I've worked with hundreds of people now, and they just, like, the mouth starts salivating, and this like desire starts building, and they just want to take the nibble. And so take the nibble. And so you want to use both your cognitive mind and your intuitive minds, and nibble a bit, but not too much. Stop at a reasonable place. Let's say in the beginning up to half a cap. Obviously, if your cap is bigger than your face, like, keep it at a quarter. But if you just have a nice, cute little dudette, whatever, and like this, then, up to half a cap or the equivalent of that. And then just wait and see how you feel. Now, the reason why I say you must use your cognitive mind and your intuitive minds is because sometimes what they do is you have a little nibble and you're like, "Ooh, I want more." And so you have another nibble and you go, ooh, I want more. And then you have another nibble and you go, ooh, I want more. And so you have to watch out for the mores and not let the mores overtake you, because they will push you with the mores to uncomfortable places, especially if you have a predisposition to the mores with anything else. So their intention, as far as I've found so far, is to help you be in right relationship and balance with yourself, to have peace within so you can have peace in all of your relations, inside and outside. And so if there's something, especially whatever's just under your skin, that's ready to come up and be shifted, that's what they'll push those buttons of or for. And so whether that's extreme trepidation and fear, or that like, yeah, I just want to go, because actually all those guys who, and actually I've never had any women tell me that, only dudes, where they're like, yeah, I'm gonna eat 7 caps and I'm gonna like, yeah, I'm gonna take like 20 grams, like now, and then we're gonna go to a rave. Sorry. Like, how did that work out for you? And they were like, oh man,
Right.
horrible. I felt like I was trapped inside myself in an endless loop for a short eternity. And I'm like, did you vomit everywhere? And they were like, oh man, no, but oh, the stomach griping. I'm like, so they beat the shit out of you, huh? And they're like, oh, dude, never want to do it again. Worst ever. But then you have other stories where one man told me he was out in the woods. He was a local man, so it must have been somewhere between here and Dartmoor. Let's say Devon. And he was going through a walk in the woods, and the sun was shining, and it was a beautiful autumnal day. And he sees them glistening in the sun. And he was overcome with this like childlike wonderment. And he walked up to them and didn't really know so much about them, but just knew he needed to eat it. And so he ate a whole cap, and he said he had the most euphoric, blissful, like all the trees had auras, and he could see them talking to each other. And he said like none of the animals were afraid of him, and he just felt like he slipped into a Disney movie. Everything was singing, and everything had these beautiful auric fields. But he ate one fresh cap based on this deep feeling of connection and love and curiosity, and was all the right sort of yesness that this mushroom deeply welcomes. So I hope you can kind of hear the spectrum of you within all of those different sort of stories, and in understanding you, find your relationship with this master mushroom teacher.
Wow. I love the Mores. That's a great example. And I think it's something that we really need to, always be mindful of, because in the two different stories and scenarios in what you shared about, I think, the more and more, especially in Canada, with cannabis being legal and edibles being a big thing, and they taste so good, people eat too much, and that's why it's always low and slow. You can always eat more over time, but you can't undo it once you've already gone down that path.
Yeah.
And
And the only way
cannabis,
out is
I know,
through.
can be challenging, same as any psychedelic, from that sense, because it also takes a while for it to kick in. Cannabis is different, psilocybin, has different kind of variances. So it's really important from a safety and intentional use perspective. And then I think, what came up for me is, as you told the two different stories, the guy who eats all this stuff with no conscious intention. He's going to a rave. He's going into this vibe and having a really, shitty experience, to, lack of a better word, to the person who, in its natural environment, in nature, with connection,
Mm.
from a natural perspective, the two experiences, I think, are representative of, the mindset, the set and setting that always comes up with any intentional, practical, intentional use of any of these medicines is just so, so important. And, I can't stress that enough, because there's nothing worse than not being prepared necessarily for what you're dealing with, because you've been like that, ego guy who's, I'm gonna just, I can eat everything, and the experience then comes up. So the time's getting on. We want to keep this to about an hour. A couple of things I just want to touch on, and then I want to go to Q&A if anybody has any questions. And if you do have some questions, you can raise your digital hand at the bottom of the Zoom window, and we'll be able to bring you in. So, Avi, my question is, what do you see is the, in today's world with the mental health challenges that are out there, and the epidemics that are in that world, and all sorts of different health concerns that are kind of plaguing the world in general, what are these specific mushrooms good for?
Everything. Uh, So let me break that down. So the two main alkaloids that I've already named, the ibotenic acid and the muscimol, work on the muscarinic acetylcholine and the GABA neurotransmitters. Now, those neurotransmitters are responsible for pretty much our whole body's intercommunication systems. That's everything from anxiety and depression to hormonal balancing to fertility to eczema to hair loss or hair growth or fibromyalgia, multiple sclerosis, like sciatica, nerve issues. So anywhere within the body, anywhere where the vagus nerve or your glutamate cholinergic system channels or like pituitary, hypothalamus, like it goes on, executive function. So these are the neurotransmitters that govern the communication between all of your major internal organs and your central nervous system and your autonomic nervous system. So literally like everything. Yeah. And so what does that mean? That means that whatever's going on within you, psychologically, emotionally, physiologically, and I'm going to add spiritually, this mushroom can help you to balance. Now, it's not going to do everything all at once, because you would have a breakdown. Like that's not feasible. It's one step at a time, one neurotransmitter section connection at a time. And then in the way that I work, at least, because really they've taught me from the forest, and the way that they've taught me is showing how they are in such deep and mutual relationship with the forest. They're ectomycorrhizal, meaning that they can only grow with the roots of trees or tree-like bushes, as they have shown me. I didn't know that they grew with gorse, but apparently they grow with gorse. I thought they needed other trees, but apparently they can grow with gorse, which is incredible. And I won't go into the Celtic or Norse mythologies about that, or into the Ogham, but it's really cool. And if you know anything about that, look it up. It's really cool. And so when you look at how they grow, and then you use them in a mirrored way medicinally in your body. And again, it's all about dosing. So when you're looking at medicinal quantities, you're looking at sort of threshold to lower. The majority of the people choose microdosing, and then it's what I call plant partnering. So because Amanita muscaria is so versatile, sometimes if they can go anywhere, you need to tell them where you want them to go. So you partner it with another plant and or a mushroom to say, I want to work on my gut, right? So for example, turkey tail, which is an incredible mushroom and is in its extraction for gut healing and immune boosting. So you partner that together. What do you get? You get amplified gut healing and immune boosting properties. The vitamin D in Amanita muscaria is over 250% of your daily recommended intake. So You're looking at a partnership that becomes greater than the sum of its parts and an accelerated effect of both. Yeah. And so this is the way that I recommend people work with Amanita muscaria. That is to say, if you're already taking supplements and you add Amanita muscaria to your supplements, Amanita will amplify, because basically anywhere you have neurotransmitters in your GABA or your acetylcholine receptors that aren't firing right, they'll help that to balance and those to fire right. So you'll have a more efficient uptake of the other nutrients, flavonoids and polysaccharides that are existent not only in Amanita muscaria, but the other herbs or mushrooms that you're taking alongside of it.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. So, hey, we've got a couple of questions here, and some might relate to part of what you were just sharing. So Mick Wren, he's watching on Unify right now, and he says, I don't know how true this is, but he read that Fly Agaric used in summer has a different effect than those consumed during the fall. Summer mushrooms are more psychedelic, whilst the fall ones are more narcotic in effect. Is there any truth to this? And he also goes on to say, great talk, by the way. Thanks, Mick.
Thanks. Okay, so I've actually never seen a flush of Amanita muscaria in the summer. But there is a difference in take it all with a pinch of salt, because like I said, Amanita muscaria does whatever Amanita muscaria wants to do. But we have found through testing them that the earlier season mushrooms that begin fruiting, say, end of August, September, so like early autumn, I guess that would be late-ish summer, depending on where you are. So late-ish summer to early autumn tend to be higher in ibotenic acid, which is not hallucinogenic in effect, but is the sort of more excited and strength and like need to walk for 40 miles, like minimum 20, right? With like a backpack that's like a little bit heavier than you would carry, just to feel like tired before 10, 11 o'clock at night. With that being said, those earlier fruiting mushrooms also tend to pick up more of the heavy metals than the later fruiting mushrooms. So the later fruiting mushrooms do tend to have more muscimol in them in balance than the earlier ones. But if you think about that in terms of seasonal activities, you're busy foraging and harvesting and preparing and stocking up ready for winter from late August till, early November. So you need that ibotenic acid to give you that energy to walk the 20 miles, to find the mushrooms and the herbs and the firewood and then to clean it and store it and prepare it and like that's what the autumn season is, right? And then when you get to midwinter and you've done your good stockpiling, then actually what you need is to just be like, I don't want to be bored right now. Let's just chill and sleep because it's freaking dark all the time, right?
Hibernation time.
Yeah, and that's what muscimol is really good for. That nice, yummy, I could just sleep and be happy in my little hibernating hut. And so seasonally, it makes sense. Now, the other thing I just wanted to name with that question is that also Amanita muscaria does respond to your biochemistry. So however you are, no matter whether it's summer, autumn, or winter, they will respond to what you need. And so you have two different factors. You have the outside factors and you have the inside factors.
Beautiful. What a great clarification on that. I really appreciate that. And one of the things, in what you've shared kind of made me think about the comparisons in a way from, Northern Europe and Siberia and what they deal with climate-wise, life-wise, all of those things, and how plants help them in terms of the mushroom, in terms of energy and walking and things. And it got me thinking about, in South America, the use of the coca leaf, in many ways help them in so many different aspects of energy, altitude, hunger and things like that, and how the plants and how, the ancient peoples knew because they were listening to the plants, and they knew what plant in their area would support them, to live a better, more productive life. I've always believed nature is the best pharmacy. And these are just two great examples that are kind of literally polar opposite in many ways geographically, and how different plant teachers, help support
Oh
their lives.
no,
So,
Amanita Muscaria is anthropologically been shown to be used as far south as Colombia. There's a relief on a temple wall in Tulum where it shows Amanita Muscaria and psilocybes being worked with together in a ritual way on that site. I won't go into that story because we don't have time, but it's a really cool story. Anyway, and also there's stories where when you dig into Colombian mythologies and folklore, where actually there's combinations using the coca and Amanita muscaria together for certain types of sport ritual or active ritual, which again we can dive into maybe another time if people want to go into the folklore.
I love ancient archaeology and the rich history of the indigenous people of all the lands, and the things that they knew that, kind of got lost or suppressed or buried over time. And I really respect and appreciate how things are now and to forward to humanity. So we have another question from Andre. He's here in our Zoom room. Andre, do you want to come on camera and ask you a question yourself, or you want me to just share it out there? What do you want to do? I can unmute you and we can bring you in and you can ask your question. It's the way we like to do it. Have some fun with Zoom.
Can you hear me now?
We can. You're going to bring Andre in, please, Michael? There we go.
Okay.
Andre, where are you coming in from, Andre? Where are you geographically?
From the Netherlands.
Beautiful.
Cool.
Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. And I was curious for the Amanita for 3 years or so. And last year I tried some, but I trying it really slow. So I tried some Amanitas, and I have them stored now for a year. So my question is, for how long can dried Amanita be stored? I have them in a jar, so it's tight, I think.
So I mean, I think that they do start to lose potency. Obviously, the sooner you consume them from when you've picked them, the stronger or the more active the alkaloids will be. There'll be less degradation. But actually, I find that they last throughout the whole year. And I've actually had some caps that have lasted pretty strong caps for 2 years. But if I'm honest with you, I've never kept them longer than 2 years because they get used up. And a lot of people will be like, no, 6 months to a year tops. And I'm like, oh no, I've definitely been like, oh my God, I found a jar I didn't know I had. I must have put that in there 2 years ago. Let's see. And again, with that curiosity, like and testing and seeing what's there. And they definitely weren't as strong as as others when we first picked them. But you have to remember that not all caps are equal. So we don't know whether they were just not as strong caps or whether it was them sitting in a jar forgotten in the deep darkness of my closet for 2 years that were the factors, because there's so many different factors. Like, did I pick them in September or December? Did like so many factors.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I have already a mixture of different caps, so that's. I hope that will level out then.
Beautiful. Yeah. Do you prepare them? Do you just nibble them? Do you put them into a tea? How do you consume them?
I nibble them because I also like the taste of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. I love it.
And I dry them in the oven, like you said, with sometimes door open, door closed, and then. But
Yeah.
I'm also curious for the fresh ones, so maybe this autumn I will try that.
So when you're starting with the fresh ones, what I recommend, I'm trying to contain myself because I get like a little bit too euphoric. So what I actually recommend is when you're picking them, this bit here, oh my God, this bit, just like, just the skirt, just eat the skirt. Just lick the skirt. Um, and start there because you'll feel it. Yeah, you'll feel that sort of like and like keep on your walking and just let yourself feel how licking the skirt feels. And then before you go more, because again, depending on the cap, sometimes if you just have like a bite, you're fine. But sometimes some of those caps, oh boy, just a bite, and that's like a whole sort of like tummy. Do I need to stop? Like something I need to. But my caveat, if you're gonna choose to go the way of the nibble with the fresh caps, is of course small nibbles. Start with the skirt and then only one bite. And if the tummy thing starts to happen, or any of like the woozy or the delirium, pause and stop and see what they're showing you. Because if you resist the emotions that want to come up, that's when the nausea and the disorientation and the time looping and the lost feelings start happening. But if you pause and you really tune in and you listen in and you allow out whatever the feelings are, then it just becomes like the most euphoric fairy time in the forest ever.
Great. Well, Andre, thank you so much for joining us from the Netherlands. Thank you for your questions and being
Thank
part of
you.
our program. And Avi, I just love your answers and your playfulness and your passion for what you're sharing. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And I want to, oh, we have a quick question. Guy, we're running low on time. If we can make it quick, we can certainly do that. I will ask you to put your camera on if you would, so we can bring you into the program. And here we go. All right.
Okay, the question is, how do you know if you're doing the capsules, how do you know when you're doing too much if you're microdosing and stuff? Because I did one in the morning, one in the evening of zero point 0.5 grams. And then I started to feel maybe this is a bit too much. Is it better to do in the morning or the evening? Or can you put your nervous system a bit on edge? Is it always safe at those sorts of levels? Or I don't know. It's just is it just intuition, or I don't know. It's quite hard to work out what the right dosage for you is. Do you have any tips?
Well, one, I'm going to say yes to all of it and no to all of it. So the answer is
Okay.
yes and no. Two, it sounds to me like you're really struggling with being able to hear yourself. And in that, this confusion comes up because that's always what these mushrooms will show us. So when we sit back and we sort of assess ourselves, it's like, okay, where do I struggle most? Do I struggle most waking up, or do I struggle most going to bed? And then just start there, because it sounds like you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed and unsure. So whatever you're taking, not just Amanita, anything, whenever we're stumbling into that overwhelmed feeling and we're not sure, dial it back and then self-assess and then say, okay. So like cognitively, those doses, totally safe, there's no problem. But what I'm hearing is that there is a problem. So it doesn't matter what the science says. Yeah, the mushroom's showing you something different. So it's like, okay, so where is it that you need most support? And then you can dial it up or you can dial it down. Like I make a alchemical tincture, for example, where I had a lady who had insomnia and she was taking like drops, like the dose is a pipette. And she was taking it like it was a flower essence. She was taking drops and it cured her insomnia. And then she was like, but I want to do this hormonal balance and it's not doing that. I'm like, well, how much are you taking? You've had like a 6-week supply for 3 months. Like what's going on? And then she told me and I was like, oh no, I said pipette, not drop. She thought one pipette was one drop. So kind of take the rules and put them to the side as suggestions and lean into what you are saying to yourself. Okay. And so, for example, one person who was taking capsules was taking, similar to you, 5 in the morning, 0.5, big distinction. 0.5 in the morning, 0.5 in the evening, and she was all over the place. So I said, do 1 gram, pick your time of day. So instead of doing the half a gram, do the 1 full gram, pick your morning or evening. And so she felt into it, she made her decision, and then it started to regulate over about a 7-day period where she sort of found herself. And what came up was a lot of grief, a lot of needing to sing, a lot of sort of needing to like move her body, and what she was organically doing was somatic emotional release and vocalizations, which was resetting her parasympathetic and her vagus nerve. So that's just one example of being able to listen, because the most important thing with microdosing, again, anything, not just Amanita Muscaria, is to be able to listen so that you can find yourself and that trust with yourself in relationship with the mushroom.
Wonderful. Thank you, Avi, for that great answer. Guy, before we let you go, where are you coming in from? Where are you in the world? Oh, are you muted? I can't hear you. I lost my sound.
No, I can't hear him either.
Oh, it's Guy. Well, you can just throw it in the chat, Guy, and we'll put it out there. I'm just always curious where people tune in from.
Oh, it is.
There we go. Where are you tuning in from? Oh, London, UK. Fantastic. Well, thank you for.
Oh, you're just up the road.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Avi, I want to thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom and your passion for this iconic and historical magical mushroom, the Amanita Muscaria. And I also want to thank my partner in production, my brother from another mother, my good friend, Michael Kraus, for running the tech on the back end. It's always appreciated so that we can, always have a good production and bring our guests in. And I'm always grateful for his support and the work that we do. And Avi, before we sign off, maybe you can tell people how they can learn more, because you're coming to actually Vancouver here locally, where we air our radio program on Conscious Living 100.5 FM in Vancouver, Co-op Radio. And you're doing an event, I believe, beginning of December here. So maybe you can tell us a little bit of how we can find you, connect with you, and continue to learn and grow.
Beautiful. Well, so my name is Avi Esther. My website is aviesther.com. It's not super creative, but
the links are all below. If you're watching this anywhere, it's all in there.
Yeah, amazing. And I will be going to Vancouver to run foraging, microdose ceremony, threshold, low dose ceremony, and high to mid dose ceremonies in Vancouver and on the West Coast. And then here I'm running an online microdose and low dose online course. And so what I'm encouraging people who want to come to those ceremonies in Vancouver to do is to start your relationship now. And within these containers, in order to do the higher doses, I feel it's really important to do the lower doses. So you start with microdosing and dreaming with the mushroom, and then you do these short self ceremonies. And so you'll learn how to build this relationship in the online course, which you'll find on my website. And then when you come and meet me in Vancouver or wherever you meet me, if you meet me, then we'll get to go deeper. And when I say deeper, I don't just mean dose-wise, which we can do dose-wise, but also you sitting at home doing a small journey with yourself will be very different from you sitting with me in the most lovely ways. So,
well, thank you for sharing, Avi. We're going to send out links and have all this information on our website at spiritplantmedicine.com. I know you're not speaking at the conference this year, but maybe you'll come and join us next year and share some of your wisdom as a speaker. That's always a possibility. We can take a look at that. But I thank you for sharing your work with our community here on Conscious Living. And again, it's always the most important thing is respect, intention, reverence, set and setting, dose low and slow, responsible use. And, you know, these are powerful medicines. They're powerful tools, and you can't just rely on them. It's not a magic pill like, you know, we seem to think in the Western world. We always have to do the work. It's that self-inquiry. It's what you talked about, resisting. What you resist persists, and you got to surrender and start looking in, and not, you know, that spiritual bypassing, or that, you know, bypassing of whatever's coming up to avoid it. So, you know, you deal with it, you move through and carry on. And that's how we create that every better day life for ourselves and even the lives of the people we touch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Avi. And for everybody listening, you've been listening to Conscious Living, another Spirit Plant Medicine episode that airs here in Vancouver on 100.5 FM CFRO in Vancouver. My name is Marc Caron, and I thank our guest, Avi Esther, for sharing her wisdom and passion for the Amanita Muscaria mushroom. Until next time, everyone, have a great day and take care of each other. Bye for now.